this is Anthony from mycodeteacher.com. This video is going to be less of an instruction video and more of an explanation video for something that I think is really important for all iPhone developers to understand. The iPhone needs to be able to manage memory very well. It doesn't have a whole lot of memory to begin with, and all these new applications that are coming out and all the apps that are in the App Store and the fact that there's multitasking now have all been combined to create an environment that's difficult for the iPhone to handle. Now, it appears to do very well. In fact, the iPhone's hardware is probably not given as much credit as it deserves, but at the same time, you have to respect the fact that it is only a mobile device with very little memory, not a very fast processor. And so you have to make sure you write your apps to be able to cope with both of those realities. So what I'm going to talk about in this video is the ViewDidUnload method. So let's open up an Xcode project. We're going to create a tab bar controller application. This will allow us to see what happens when we simulate a memory warning. So I'm going to call it memory warn. Let's just set up some view controllers first to put in the tabs. So let's launch main window.zip, get our tab bar controller out. And first of all, I'm gonna get rid of this here. I like to, I guess just force of habit, I like to make my own view controllers. Probably because I don't like the naming first view. I'm gonna do the same for second view, which actually has no view controller, it's just a zip file. Okay, and so now let's create our class for the first view controller. And then again, we'll create another for the second tab. So the first view controller is just going to be the guinea pig, so to speak, in this application, in that it's just going to be there so that we can simulate the memory warning and see it actually happen in action. The second one is where we're going to see the difference, the change in the UI because of the memory warning. So let's go back to our zip file, mainwindow.zip, and for the first tab, we will put home view controller. And for the second one, we're going to put warning view controller. Alright, so if we launch, just to make sure we have no errors, plain and simple, we should see two white screens on either tab. Very well. Alright, so now let's go into home view controller and just put a label just so we can differentiate easily. Save that and close it. Now we're gonna set up the portion of the app. This is where the lesson is to be learned. So first of all, let's put a label and a button. And we'll save that. So now we need to add an outlet and an action. So button pressed label, I'm going to call it, and a change label action. Connect. And so now the action is going to be relatively simple here. Just going to change the text in the label to say button has been pressed. Okay, let's still run the application. And here you should be able to see where the memory warning is going to come into play. So, great. Text has been changed, but now watch what happens when we simulate a memory warning. you can see that the label is set back to saying the button has not been pressed, when in fact it actually was pressed. And so the problem here is this interface is a misrepresentation of the actual data, of what actually occurred in the app, or what the state of the application is. So the iPhone, like I was saying before, it doesn't have a lot of memory, and you have to make sure that your app is able to handle memory warnings and deal with memory efficiently. So what happens here is when a memory warning is simulated, whatever views are not currently on the screen, so you can see that if we do this and then we simulate a memory warning, it stays the same. But as soon as we're on the first tab and we simulate a memory warning, it goes back to the original. Whatever view is not on the screen is completely reset in that it's unloaded to save memory. So this entire view, when we're on this tab and we simulate a memory warning, this entire view is erased, and not until we click the second tab is it recreated. And so that ViewDidLoad method will be called after the memory warning when we try to view the second tab again. So I'm going to log something so you can see that in action. Warning view controller was just loaded. And so let's stop the app and run it again. And I'm going to show you how to avoid this and the right way to program apps with lots of view controllers. So let's click on the second tab. Okay, so now, as soon as we click on the second tab, an instance of the warning view controller was created, and the view was loaded, specifically from this zip file. So now, if we simulate a memory warning, console tells us that a memory warning was simulated, and then if we go back to the second tab, you can see again the view is loaded. So when you simulate a memory warning, all views that are not on screen are erased. Now, the warning view controller object is kept intact, but the view is erased, because if you think about what a view really is as far as a GUI is meant to graphically represent what is actually happening on a computer or in an application in the background. It's simply to make it easier for the user to communicate with your app. Nothing in your app, the data, should never be UI dependent. In fact, it should always be the other way around. The UI should always be data dependent. And so the correct way to handle this is we should make a variable. Say bool button was pressed. And so when the view controller is first initialized, again, when a memory warning is simulated, only the view is erased. The object, the warning view controller object, is not erased. So your data will be saved, the view won't be safe. It'll be erased to conserve memory. So in our initialization method now, if you've never seen this before, I'm using init with coder and not init with nib, because the init with nib method is not called. When you load an object from within a zip file, it's loaded via the init with coder method, because it turns out that the way applications are bundled is that anything in a zip file is essentially frozen in this form and archived, and then it's unarchived later on. So let's make this simple. Self equals super init with coder, a decoder, and now button was pressed equals no. So by default, the button has not been pressed when the application is launched first, or when this view controller is first initialized. And so now here in the ViewDidLoad method, again, the user interface should be a representation of what's actually going on in the background. So we're going to use an if statement. If button was pressed, button pressed label text equals button has been pressed. Else button pressed label text equals button has not been pressed. And now in our change label method, we need to change button was pressed to yes. And now let's give it another shot. So button has been pressed. Go back to our first tab, simulate a memory warning, and go back to our second tab, and then you can see it. So again, the background data, or the warning view controller object that was initialized in the background of the application is not released, it's conserved. And obviously if it were released, that would be a problem. Your application, in the case of a memory warning, you would never know what was safe and what wasn't. So of course Apple has done something very intelligent here, and they've essentially said that your views are never safe. You can count on the fact that at any point in time, your view, the graphical representation of your application, may be reset. But if you keep background records, you keep data-based records of everything, of the changes in your application, and you recreate the view from those records, it shouldn't be a problem. And for that reason, the application, the iPhone, is very good at conserving and managing memory. Just to take a look at how this works, when a view is unloaded, this method, ViewDidUnload, is called. So we can actually see that warning view was unloaded. Let's stop the application and restart it. So you can see that warning view has unloaded. This was so whenever an application receives a memory warning, all views that are unloaded from memory, or all view controllers whose view is unloaded from memory, receive a call to this method. And so you can do what you need to. You can prepare for the fact that your view was just erased. But in case of point, you really shouldn't have to, because if you set everything up correctly, your application should be able to have its views erased and reset, and then recreate them based on the data. So I just wanted to make this point because it's the problem, not the problem, I don't want to say the problem, but the reality of the iPhone application store is that a lot of developers switched over only because there's a lot of money in it, and they didn't learn, they don't have a lot of Cocoa programming experience and iPhone programming experience, and they just try to bang out applications really fast for the money. And I suppose there's nothing wrong with that, but at the same time, you see lots of these kind of problems in applications because developers don't take the time to read the documentation, understand the way the iPhone works. So basically the main point here is that the state of your application should never, ever, ever, ever be dependent on the graphical representation, the view. In fact, it should always be completely opposite. You can think of it kind of like in math, when you have functions of x where y is dependent of x, but x is not dependent of y. If you have x dependent of y, your function is completely reversed. And you have to be careful because the same thing happens here. And if you come across the situation where your views, or the state of your application, is dependent on your views, you will have misrepresentations of what's going on in the app. Another common mistake as far as ViewDidLoad and ViewDidUnload methods go is a lot of developers, they treat the ViewDidLoad method as if it's the init method, and that's a big mistake. So let's say, for example, you had an application where you loaded an array of pictures that are displayed in table view from some outside web server, and you created the array that stores all those pictures in your ViewDidLoad method, and then you begin the loading. In the case that your view is unloaded, you will lose all of your pictures, and if you begin the loading of the pictures in your ViewDidLoad method, the next time the user tries to go to your view, the view with the pictures, it'll have to reload all of those pictures. So any information that you need to keep for the duration of the application, you must be sure not to create it in the ViewDidLoad method. Everything that's basically the data of your app needs to all be set in the init method. And so that wraps up this tutorial. I just wanted to make a point across, an important point that a lot of developers don't understand. But at any rate, it's a good tip, so keep this with you, and just always be aware that you're programming your apps the right way. And if you feel that something is off, it probably is, and you should just check up with your documentation and make sure you're doing everything correctly. And of course, I'm always happy to answer questions. So that's the end of this tutorial. I'm Anthony from mycodeteacher.com. Thanks a lot for watching.